Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's St. Charles County Council meeting. We will start with our invocation, which is being led by Jay Moore from Harvester Christian Church. We appreciate Harvester Christian. You guys come pray for us a lot. We appreciate that very much. We'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilman Brazel is going to lead us in that. If you would please stand and remove your caps. Jay?
Father, I thank you for these men whose passion is to create a better community for us. Please bless and protect these council members and their supporting staff for the roles they play in our county each day. Father, I ask you to give them the wisdom to govern wisely amid the conflicting interest, issues, and chaos of our times, and to provide them compassion and understanding as they perform their duties. I pray for the agenda set for them tonight, and that the conclusions reached this evening for our committee are pleasing to you, God. Father, thank you for the many and abundant blessings you provide us each day. Lord, we love you, and I pray this in the name of Jesus, your Son. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Joe Cronin.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Brazel.
Here.
Councilmember Dave Hammond.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Elam.
Here.
Councilmember Terry Hollander.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Klinghammer.
Here.
Councilmember John White.
So tonight is our first opportunity to go through a new process with conditional use permits. So I would ask your indulgence as we go through this because it is a first time and I'm the guy leading it, so you know there's a good chance I'm going to screw this up. So we'll start off with bill number 4523.
Bill number 4523, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel, an ordinance granting conditional use permit CUP 17-12 for a nursery to Jonathan R. Wingo and Deborah J. Wingo Joint Revocable Trust, DTD 1213-2006, property owner.
So I request for the planning and zoning staff member to come forward. Robert, is that you?
Yes.
So you can do it from there.
Thank you.
So Donna will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
So about bill number 4523, you
Yes.
have this application?
We do. This application is for approval of a conditional use permit to expand an existing nursery located on Ebert Lane and adjoining a residential subdivision in the city of Wentzville. And after conducting a public hearing on September 20th, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval with certain specific conditions, which are included in the draft ordinance before you tonight. One person spoke in favor on behalf of the applicant and none against, and the county has no other written communications on record, either for or against. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval unanimously, and county staff likewise recommends approval with a finding that the application substantially conforms to the conditional use permit criteria of section 405.510B of the County Code of Ordinances. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions at this point? I'd ask you to call the applicant forward.
I'd like to introduce you to the Wingos, who are the applicants.
Mr. Wingo, would you please be sworn in?
Do you solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Excellent. So is there anything that you'd like to tell us?
Well, basically, it's in a nutshell, it's an expansion of an existing conditional use permit. We're really, to simplify the issue, we're really just wanting to put up a pole barn and have more enclosed storage for our business to better organize it and keep efficiencies up as far as the business goes. We've got a good track record in the neighborhood of getting along with everybody. I live on Ebert Lane. I have 30 acres on Ebert Lane, and we're the ones that take care of the road in the winter time and help out the neighbors when they need a tractor or something. So it's a nice situation, and everybody seems to get along with it well.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, we'll open that up to public comment. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We'll now open it up for public comment. Any individual supporting or opposing the application is now invited to share their comments with the council. Council staff will call forward one at a time. Each speaker submitted a speaker card. Upon the conclusion of the individual comments, please remain at the podium for any follow-up questions from the council staff or the applicant. We encourage you to keep your comments to 3 minutes, and should another speaker have shared the same information that you have, please feel free to come forward and say ditto, and the record will reflect that you shared the opinion already stated. That's to make sure that we don't have 23 people all stand up and say the exact same thing. Unlike advertising, frequency doesn't necessarily sell. So we will start with?
I have no comment cards other than Mr. Wingo was gracious enough to fill one out on this conditional use.
Excellent. So all I have down is, does anyone have any more questions for the applicant at this point?
I guess I have a couple questions. I'm trying to, the way this is navigating, it's not really navigating the way I'd like it to, but.
Mr. Wingo, would you like to come forward?
How do you get the information to pull up on this thing? No, pull up the bill. Pull up like on this thing. It's not down there. Does it have all the stuff? Okay.
I'm sorry.
One second, we're just pulling for information.
Okay, go back down, go back up here. Click in here. Anywhere.
Okay, so. Where's the plot plan and stuff? Sir, on your, the equipment that you have tractors and backhoes or whatever. Is your equipment stored inside for the most part? Is anything going to change from what?
Currently, it's all pretty much outside, and I'm wanting to get the ability to put some of it under cover. There's other implements that, I would like to have outside storage for. It's not much sense in putting like field cultivators or things like that, in your barn, but I'd like to get a lot of the tractors and have a good place to work on things like I've got a couple combines that I collect native seed with. And
Okay, and so you've been in business how many years, sir?
30 years this month.
Oh, wow. There at that location?
I've been at that location for 10 years, or 11 years.
Okay. I have no other questions. I was just curious I couldn't pull my thing up, and so.
No, we're the ones that did like Indian Camp Creek parks, natural areas, and that sort of thing for the county way back when, but we've come a long way from being the nuts that planted weeds to people that now want to give advice on wildflowers and native habitats, so.
Okay,
Does
all
anyone
right.
else have any questions? Thank you. You may be seated. Any further discussion on this bill? Seeing none, we will close the discussion on this conditional use permit. We're moving on to public hearing of Guttermouth Road and Wood Glen Estates sanitary sewer NID. Is there anyone to speak in this public hearing?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Council, Arnie A.C. Dienoff, county resident and public advocate. This county, for some reason, has the being, as you are all Republicans, of getting out of control of spending in governmental agencies. This county is now topping or becoming real close to St. Louis County in the formation of different political subdivisions of the state or separate jurisdictions that are governed by a public governing body. Tonight, you purport to form yet another neighborhood improvement district. We have in this county a number of community improvement districts called CIDs, neighborhood improvement districts called NIDs, transportation development districts called TDDs, and tax increment financing district, which are called TIFs. These bodies are another taxing agency to tax residents. Some of the builders throughout the county, such as Lombardo Homes, McBride & Sons, and other builders are starting to get the comprehension or idea of going to O'Fallon, Lake St. Louis, and creating community improvement districts which would put a necessary burden of anywhere from $400 to $1,000 annual special tax on the residents per year. These developers don't want to put in the infrastructure, the capital improvements to make their profits, but they want to put it on the backs of residents moving from adjoining counties or out of state to our county. They don't want to pay for roads up front. They don't want to pay for sewers, water lines, and necessary electric infrastructure to provide to the residents to build the homes. So we keep creating these governmental agencies that are taxing bodies over and over again. I would caution the council to put a lid on it and only do the bare minimum of the essential type districts. Again, this is going to put a burden on the Guttermouth and Wood Glen Estates area of anywhere from probably $400 to $1,000 extra special tax bill on these residents on their backs. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in this public hearing?
Sir, I haven't filled out a form, but I'm a Woodland resident. I'd like to speak in favor of this NID.
That's what this one is for.
Okay.
You don't need a card to speak at the public hearing. You're all good.
My name is Scott Berman. I live at 1 Woodland. These are my neighbors. They live at Woodland also. I don't care if they care to speak. I believe this gentleman was just saying something about tax burden. Well, as I understand it, this NID, the only people it affects are the 12 of us that's paying for it. So I guess that's the only thing I wanted to say, is that it doesn't affect anybody except us. So we'd all like to have sewer systems. So, okay?
Yes, sir.
Is that it?
That's it.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else care to speak?
Ditto.
Ditto. God bless you. That was nice. Anyone else? All right, with that, then we will close this public hearing. Thank you for your comments. We'll move on to public comments. So with public comments, we limit those to 3 minutes. We typically try to go 1 for, 1 against, up to 3 on each side. And once a topic is started, we'll stick with that topic until those 6 speakers have spoken. We ask that you stay to that time limit. Once the 3 minutes are up, I'll ask you to stop speaking, have a seat, and we'll bring up the next speaker to be fair to all. Our first speaker tonight is
Holland Wilcox?
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox.
I don't know if I'm in the right order or what.
Hey, you get to lead us off tonight, so.
Hi, my name is Holland Wilcox. I'm here to speak on AVR -17, is it AVR 17-01? Does everyone
Yes, sir.
have that? Okay. Approximately a year and a half ago, I decided to put I needed a carport at my property, number 1 Creekwood Court. It's a corner lot. And we did quite a bit of
If I can interrupt
improvements.
you for one moment.
Yes.
For the board, it's bill number 4520.
Yes.
Go ahead. I just wanted to help you out.
Okay, thank
It
you.
references the bill number, so
Thank
they
you.
know what you're talking about.
Okay. I am a project manager for Metropolitan Sewer District. I work in civil engineering. I've been there 20 years, and I work with right-of-ways, survey, easements, setbacks, that sort of thing, every day, building permits. So when I knew that I was going to do this project, I knew I had some due diligence to do. I had some phone calls to make. So on April 28th, I called the Community Development Department 3 times and talked to them for a total of 45 minutes. Basically, to shorten it up, I asked them, where do I need to put this at? Where do I need to put this 10 by 25 foot concrete pad in my yard so I can put a carport there? The lady told me, she goes, as you know, sir, you live on a corner lot, and because you have a corner lot, you do not have a backyard. You have just a front yard. So the setback for your house is 50 feet from the center of the street. And that is exactly where your carport should go, is 50 foot from the center of the street, just like a carport would be alongside your house. And I said, well, I'll do you one better. I said, I work with easements all the time. I'll put it 51 feet back from the street, just so there's no encroachment. I took out a maple tree. I took an 80 by 20 foot deck off. I had, after April 22nd, on May 5th, I signed a contract with a concrete contractor to pour this 38-foot driveway and 10 by 25-foot pad to the rear of my home. Then I landscaped the yard. Come September, I had All Steel Car Parts come in and put a carport on it. Well, they had 3 things to do. 1, bring the right material. 2, put it on the 10 by 25 foot pad. And 3, get a building permit. Okay, well, my concrete contractor, he got the building permit. He got the right-of-way permit from St. Louis County Highway Department, which I also have the phone records where I called them on the same day as I called Community Development.
Sir, your time has expired, but I would tell you we're going to be introducing your bill tonight.
That's fine.
So when we introduce your bill, we'll call you up and we'll speak more, because
That
I'm
would be
sure we'll
fine.
have questions.
Yeah, this is my first time with you guys.
Not a
so
problem.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Arnie Deanoff?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of council, Arnie A.C. Deanoff, public advocate and resident. A big topic among the county has been the Sunshine Law, Chapter 610, which requires and mandates the county adhere to the Fair Open Meetings Act and dissemination of public information upon request of a department director or the county executive. Our citizens, our 427,000 residents, deserve fairness in county government no matter what. Our citizens demand public accountability, demand honesty and transparency of county government, deserve ethical and responsible county government and county government leaders. A lot of times the county executive's office or its department heads or the director of administration fail to meet the requirements of Chapter 610 and thumb their nose at residents who want to get involved and know about government and keep and hold you accountable. The Sunshine Law, Chapter 610, has different provisions and requirements. I had a discussion after the last meeting with the county councilor, Keith Hazelwood, who's not here this evening, but usually sits to the left of Mr. Ellman over at the administration table. My discussion was to try to head off any potential lawsuits because the council or our county government failed to meet the requirements and meet the simple law of the Open Meetings Act. One thing that I'd like to close out is at 6:15 tonight, you held a closed session pursuant to state statute, but the statute in 610 requires you to divulge what you're meeting for, whether it's personnel, whether it's real estate, whether it's contract negotiations, whether it's secure information. You didn't put that disclosure on the agenda, which is a requirement of state law. One meeting you held a closed session, you had a captain that was elevated from a corporal and jumped the hoops of other ranks without the other requirements, which was against the professionalism of why we voted to go from a sheriff's department to a police department. The person never held any leadership positions in our county or doesn't hold leader positions in his profession. He came and gave me a directive and order that if I didn't leave the building, that he was going to arrest me. Well, Chapter 610, as you all require, or you all know from Keith Hazelwood's dissertation or his memo to you, requires that the meeting facility be open for residents to come. So when you come to an agreement or come back into open session, you have to do that in the eyes of the public, and you have to disclose and take those votes out in public. Another thing that you need to work on is disclosure of votes. You want to keep a lot of secrets here. You want to meet behind closed doors. You want to take votes, but you don't want to disclose them when they're requested of the county council staff to my left. Today I discussed with the county registrar, who, according to our charter, is the county clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Deanoff. Your time has expired, and our next speaker tonight would be.
There are no more speakers.
So with that, we will close public comments. I'll move on to the oral report from the county executive.
No report this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda, or do I have a motion?
Motion for approval is submitted.
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We'll move on to bills for final passage. We'll start with bill number 4516.
Bill number 4516, an ordinance repealing Chapter 631 of the ordinances of St. Charles County, Missouri, OSCCMO, relating to issuance of certain occupational licenses for fence installers by St. Charles County under Title VI OSCCMO.
Any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Cronin.
You know, I guess this is kind of a case of be careful what you wish for. While when we did discussions on the code, there was in my district and Mr. Brazel's district, there was concerns about having farmers have to go pull fence permits for putting up a barbed wire fence on the back 40 to keep a few extra cattle. And under those circumstances, I kind of agree that, you know, we don't need occupational licenses for fence installers, so Farmer Jones don't have to go down and prove his competence putting up a barbed wire fence. But the same token, in my district also, there's subdivisions like Jackson Estates where you have quarter-acre lots. And those those fence permits and the whole fence occupational licensing procedure does two things. One, it keeps unscrupulous fence companies from operating this county. They've got to go get a permit to be a licensed installer. They've got to reach certain requirements. I think there's a bonding requirement, okay? I talked to Mike Herbert about that some today, and so I think it does protect the residents in that county in that respect. Secondly, when you have a tight area like a subdivision, you make sure that those fence posts aren't getting driven over utilities or over the neighbor's line or other things that can happen. You know, both as an alderman and as a former alderman, I never thought we needed them in rural areas, but in residential areas, maybe in commercial industrial, I don't think it's a bad idea to make sure that people putting the fences in are licensed and bonded, and those plans are reviewed by county staff to make sure they're not, a liability to the utility companies or anybody else. So, I've got some second thoughts about this one, and I'm sorry I missed last meeting. I couldn't voice those. But I did talk to Mike Herbert today, and I think he gets the gist of where I'm coming from on it. I'm willing to go along with this, but I think it could be something that's going to come back and bite us in the butt down the road. Okay?
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Hammond?
Well, I can recall before we ever required fence permits or these licensing requirements that rarely, I don't even remember ever getting a complaint or having a problem when I ran the county building department. I think eventually there was a situation in one of the councilman's district where maybe there was an issue, but I would not be supportive of requiring fence permits or requiring the occupation license for the fence installers.
Any other questions or comments?
I've had some experience in the past in residential areas about putting up fences and where exactly they are, and they're not necessarily easy to understand exactly where the fences go in the residential areas. We had a gentleman here a few moments ago talking about a corner lot. Well, a corner lot really has 2 front yards, and most people don't really realize that. And when they try to read the ordinances concerning about where to put a fence, it is a little confusing to think about having 2 front yards. I mean, most of us think we have a front yard, a couple side yards, and a backyard. But when you're putting up fences, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. And I think that we may want to look at putting regulations in again about fencing in residential zonings, not in as Mr. Cronin alluded to, the putting the barbed wire fence up in the back 40 doesn't need it there, but in tight neighborhood residential zonings, it very well could, especially in situations where the yards are smaller, and a couple of feet either way makes a bit of a difference.
Yes, sir.
Well, I agree with this ordinance repealing the bill. Now, you guys remember the reason we're doing this is because we went through the whole IBC, and we don't require permits for 6-foot fences. So therefore, you can't have someone licensed if they don't require a permit, because you never know what they're doing. That's why we did this. So you guys are talking about retracting and revisiting it. That doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, I definitely support repealing this. It's too much government. We don't need to be telling people how to put their fences. They're extremely basic, non-mechanical. You can't there's not a safety issue. It's a civil matter if the guy puts it up poorly and damages something. So that's not county's government to get involved in that kind of stuff.
Any other questions or comments on this topic?
I think the point is when we talked about this before, it was all residential or agricultural settings, okay? The residential thing throws a whole nother light on it, okay? And we do have quite a few subdivisions in unincorporated areas of the county, especially some of the older subdivisions. And I know from the city, I know all the cities in this county pretty well require a fence permit and a licensed fence contractor. So the first time you have a guy that's not permitted and he's a fly-by-night guy and he comes in and puts a permit in, or fence in without a permit, he puts it right on top of a buried utility line, something like that, then you've got a problem. And I know, for instance, like Wentzville staff, because I went through this with my son, they make sure that the areas are not only the fences are put correctly, but there is also enough room between those fences and around those fences to service the utilities that most often run along those same property lines. So I appreciate Mr. Hammond's comments that there hasn't been a problem before, and I'm willing to hear from Mr. Hurlbert and say that he's not concerned about this being a future problem. But I think there's a reason why every city in this county has fence permits in residential areas, and that's to protect the residents and to ward off problems down the road. Okay?
Judd, let's get together and work on that. I think that the compromise may be that we need a permit, but not necessarily a licensed fence installer to put it up. If somebody can strike their own line and get a post hole digger and put up their own wooden fence, that's, that they should be able to, just like you can build your own house if you have the capability to do it. And Mr. Brazel's point, I don't know that we need to tell people that they have to hire a licensed contractor to do a fence. It's a pretty simple process when you get right down to it.
Would you consider a motion to table and get some opinions from Mr. Hurlbert on this?
Since we don't have we don't have a permit right now, I don't think that this bill causes any problems. We need to first put in the process to have a permit and then come back and say, well, whether we'll address the issue of whether or not it needs to be a licensed contractor that does it or not. If that's all right with you.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, in this 14 years I've been around, I remember this only coming up one time. And some of you may remember it was actually John White's district, and it was somebody who put a fence. It was the same situation. It was a corner lot, and they put a fence on the corner, and they built it in the right-of-way. And we needed to do something, or I don't know, one of the utilities complained. We sent them a letter, hey, you're going to have to move your fence. And what it came down to is, they had a company come in and build it without getting a building permit. If they'd gotten the building permit, they would have known where to put it. So, what we got is one time that this would have worked but didn't, to weigh that against how many hundreds of times people had to come and get a permit for something that you usually wouldn't have to. So I just want you to know that's really the only time I remember it even being an issue.
Any further discussion on this bill? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Bill number 4516, an ordinance repealing Chapter 631 of the Ordinances of St. Charles County, Missouri, OSCCMO, relating to issuance of certain occupational licenses for fence installers by St. Charles County under Title VI OSCCMO. Councilmember Cronin?
No.
Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Councilmember Elam?
Yes.
Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Bill number 4516 passes. Move on to Bill 4517.
Bill number 4517, an ordinance establishing a new traffic regulation and establishing penalties for violations thereof.
Any questions or comments on this bill? Seeing none?
An ordinance establishing a new traffic regulation and establishing penalties for violations thereof. Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Councilmember Elam?
Yes.
Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Councilmember Cronin?
Yes.
Bill number 4517 passes. We'll move on to Bill number 4518.
Bill number 4518, an ordinance designating and recognizing the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau as the state fiscal year 2019 through 2021 representative destination marketing organization, DMO, for tourism in St. Charles County as required for participation in the Missouri Division of Tourism's Cooperative Marketing Program for the state fiscal year 2019 through 2021 funding cycle.
Any questions or comments on this bill? Seeing none?
An ordinance designating and recognizing the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau as the state fiscal year 2019 through 2021 representative destination marketing organization, DMO, for tourism in St. Charles County as required for participation in the Missouri Division of Tourism's Cooperative Marketing Program for the state fiscal year 2019 through 2021 funding cycle. Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Councilmember Elam?
Yes.
Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Councilmember Cronin?
Yes.
Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Bill number 4518 passes. Move on to bill number 4519.
Bill number 4519, an ordinance for receipt of grant funds in the amount of $5,000 from Maddie's Fund for the Division of Humane Services, a division within the Department of Public Health, for targeted veterinary care and amending the 2017 budget adopted by Ordinance 16-104 by appropriating additional funds in the General Fund Budget, Division of Humane Services.
Any questions or comments on bill 4519? Seeing none?
An ordinance for receipt of grant funds in the amount of $5,000 from Maddie's Fund for the Division of Humane Services, a division within the Department of Public Health, for targeted veterinary care and amending the 2017 budget adopted by Ordinance 16-104 by appropriating additional funds in the General Fund Budget, Division of Humane Services. Councilmember Elam?
Yes.
Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Councilmember Cronin?
Yes.
Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Bill number 4519 passes. That concludes bills for final passage. Move on to bills for introduction, starting with bill number 4520.
Bill number 4520, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Terry Hollander, an ordinance approving the amended planned unit development of Park Charles South, Plat 2, Lot 250, to allow a front yard setback of 24.5 feet for a carport as per application AVR 17-01.
Any questions or comments on this bill? This is the one that the applicant spoke on earlier during public comment. So if anyone has questions for him, we can bring him back up.
Yeah, let's,
Sir, would you like to come back up again? Give you the opportunity to finish your thought that you started with.
Yeah. As I was saying, I called the Community Development Office and asked them specific questions about where does this carport need to be, what's the setback, and they told me 50 foot from the center of the street. I've been a surveyor, been on survey teams. I said, I'll do you one better, I'll put it 51 foot back, that way there's no encroachment at all. So I had a tree removed, took a deck down, got the concrete contractor in, he poured the concrete. Couple months later, I get a carport, they put the carport on, everybody pulls a building permit except the person putting the carport up. I asked him, did you pull a building permit? They were all Hispanic, he goes, "Si, senor," and he drives off, okay? So a couple of months later, I get a call from the county saying there's no building permit for your carport. So I go to apply for the building permit, and a few months later, while I'm filling out the building permit, they say, hey, you're out of zone. You're supposed to be 50 foot back from the property line, not 50 foot back from the center of the street, okay? Well, I said, well, if I would have known that, it would be 50 foot back from the property line, because I know the difference between a property line and the center of the street. I staked it myself with 20-foot offsets. So inadvertently, some employee at the Planning and Zoning Office give me the incorrect information. I don't think anybody had an agenda for me to do something wrong. But they told me, hey, you're all a front yard. All you have to do is have the same setback as your house. So I even give an extra 1 foot. I've been to the Planning and Zoning Office 2 times. I've talked to Mr. Myers here. He's been very kind to me. I've even went to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and this is just going through the steps.
Sure. What
I'm asking for is a hardship here to where rather than rip out, I have over $60,000 in all of this work, rather than rip everything out and put it back another 25 feet, that you grant me the easement, grant me the zone, and the carport has 2 metal sides on it that's not up to building code, and I told them I'd gladly take that down and put regular siding up, whatever they would want. but I'm in a tight bind here to where I put it in per instructions. Whether that employee, I'm sure, made a mistake, according to the Planning and Zoning Department. They're the ones that tell me, hey, you know, they won't admit to it, of course, because it's a legal issue. But I know that nobody had any animosity towards me. But gentlemen, I have impeccable qualifications at putting in a project like this. I put in $5 million projects every day. I deal with easements and setbacks, and I asked specific questions, and they told me 50 feet. Now, the concrete was in 2 months before the carport. It was a pre-existing condition. All the work I had to do before I put the carport in. So I had to take a tree out, take down a deck, pour the concrete, and landscape the yard. And then 2 months later, after everything's cured, everything's settled, I have a carport company come in. If they would have went to planning and zoning and did their building permit, planning and zoning would have told them, you can't put that carport up. It's out of zone.
Okay.
But I would have been stuck with a sunk cost of a 10 by 25 foot pad and a 38-foot driveway, plus all the tree removal and everything, on the instruction of the planning and zoning employee. Now, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not going to name any names and everything, but I do think that I've been very fair. This has been going on for over a year. This is my 4th hearing, and I've been to court with the building department for not filing a building permit. And I filed a building permit in January, and they sent me to court in April because they couldn't find it. So I've been bending over backwards. I even had a meeting today here with Mr. Myers, and I didn't even know I was on the docket tonight. Nobody sent me nothing in the mail. Nobody's even sent me an email that says, hey, Mr. Wilcox, you're on the docket tonight. I wouldn't even be standing before you if I wouldn't have taken it on myself to do my due diligence with the Planning and Zoning Department.
So if you're fine with it, I'd like to open it up to questions from council members right now.
Certainly.
So we'll start with Mr. Klinghammer.
Yes, I can understand how it happened now, and I don't know about the other jurisdictions that you've worked in, but our staff knows that the road isn't necessarily built in the center of the right-of-way. So it's highly unusual for them to say to measure from the middle of the road. The middle of the road shifts, it moves. You're familiar with that as well.
Sure.
Especially in platted subdivisions, everything is from the property line. So it's extremely unusual for them to say, you know, do it from the middle of the road.
What did make sense is
just a minute.
I'm sorry, sir.
The other thing is, at planning and zoning meeting, before the meeting started, Mr. Fromm, the chairman of the board, told everybody that that their actions were going to be acted upon at tonight's meeting. That was part of his comment. So, you know, maybe nobody's mailed anything to you and said you were going to be on the agenda, but you were told at the planning and zoning meeting that those actions that we took on that night were going to be reviewed by this board tonight.
Yes.
Okay.
But not in concrete terms. You guys said, oh, when's the next planning and when is the next committee meeting? And one of you says, well, I think it's after Columbus Day. Okay. And I have that on tape. I have the videotape of everything. But there was nothing concrete that said, Mr. Wilcox, on October 10th, you have to be here.
Okay. So does anyone else have questions?
Yeah,
Mr. Holland.
I know that you have experience in this area. My guess would be that throughout the area, very, very few jurisdictions would be measuring from the middle of the road. And my question is, didn't that set some bells off?
Not when you have houses that are measured from the center of the road. All the houses are measured from a 50-foot setback from the center of the road. The front of the house, the side of the house. The employee at the Planning and Zoning Department told me as long as I had my structure, even with the edge of my house and the edge of the neighbor's house, to where when they backed out of the driveway, they could look left and right and have an unimpeded view of traffic, that's all that was required. So I said, well, I'm going to give you another foot because I don't want to encroach. I know the difference between a property line.
I know.
Yes, very much so.
That was
but
my point.
I live in unincorporated St. Peters.
Right.
So whenever the employee said, hey, you just have to meet the 50-foot setback, just like if you was putting it alongside your garage. That did not send off any bells and whistles. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have street lights. We're unincorporated. And I said, certainly, whatever you want, I will give it to you. And I put it in there, and it's a pre-existing condition. And now the zoning department is saying, well, the reason that you're in trouble, the reason I'm standing before you is because my contractor
Didn't pull a permit.
didn't pull a permit. Well,
Right.
I had to do a lot of work to prepare for that permit. Okay?
Understand. So further questions, we'll go to Mr. Brazel. I have a feeling there's more.
Yes, sir.
I do have a couple questions, but I want to ask Jared a couple questions after I ask
Certainly.
you. You did get the permit for the concrete,
Yes.
correct? Okay, and who'd that come from?
That came from St. Charles County right away.
Highway
Department. GMP Concrete pulled it. I have phone records where I called them on the 28th.
That's all, I don't need,
Yes.
okay.
So,
Okay, and then so the setback, the side setback, I understand exactly
Yes.
everything you're saying. So
Okay.
50 from that or 20, what is it actually? Is it?
well, actually, I went 9.5 feet from the back property line. You have a 7-foot setback from your property lines. I went 9.5 feet. I went 51 feet from the center.
And how
Okay, which
far-
would
so-
put me 24.5 feet behind my property line is where the 10 by 25 foot pad starts.
Okay, all
Okay,
right. That's the only, can I want to ask Jared a
Can
couple
we
of questions.
do
Yeah,
Mr. Cronin? Then
yeah,
I have a
yes.
feeling there's going to be more questions for him. Mr. Cronin?
Yes, sir.
I've read both letters from the people that complained about your structure.
Yes.
Okay? And they're not mentioning the setback, okay? They're mentioning
Okay.
the fact of the appearance of the structure. Looking at the picture of the structure, it's considerably taller than the other buildings. I think
Yes.
it's probably 15, 20 foot tall at the peak.
It's a
I'm thinking.
10 footer at the peak. It's probably close to 15.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I'm assuming you're not planning on finishing the walls? It's an open wall looking?
No,
structure?
I am going to take the steel walls down, which the building code said is out of code, and they said I could put walls up of a different material.
Okay.
So I told them I would match that.
And this is not my district, but I can tell you when something like this comes up in my district, I usually tell people the first thing to talk to if you're asking for some type of variance is talk to your neighbors and see. You've got a track record from a couple neighbors that have wrote to P&Z about this. You might talk to them and say, what can I do to make this thing appearances better to suit you?
I'm certainly glad you brought that up because I would like to tell you why you only have 2 letters. As I met with the Planning and Zoning Department and told them the situation, and they told me, hey, you're not gonna make any points by throwing anybody under the bus. I met them on the 23rd of June. On June 26th, I sent out all the letters to my neighbors absolving anyone of any blame. I said, I myself, due to miscommunication, I erected my carport in my backyard inadvertently. And I made a deal with them behind closed doors that if I didn't throw anybody underneath the bus, that they would grandfather me in if they could. Well, this went above their head and got kicked out. So I didn't go to my neighbors are very, very inflamed with the county because we have one bad neighbor. There's like 40 houses there. They turn us into the building department, but they only turn select people in, about 10 of the houses. So you'll have these trash houses, but 10 of us, Jim Veach has to come over and write us up all the time. So that's the one that you have that's against, is this problem neighbor.
The one that I'm reading, sir, he commented, he says you are a very good and kind person. He says,
I have the whole neighborhood. I have the whole neighborhood behind me. And I didn't want to mobilize the neighborhood and have a volatile environment, and I was trying to protect the Planning and Zoning Office and the Planning and Zoning Committee. I've had my neighbors ask me time and time again, what do you want us to write? Who do you want us to email? Who do you want us to yell at? And I said, nobody. I tried to get this fixed before meeting you guys. I met with the Planning and Zoning Department in closed doors twice. And says, guys, what do I have to do to help you? I'm a government employee. I don't want to put you on the spot. This was caused by your mistake.
Fair enough. I think we understand your point. You've been pretty clear.
Thank you, sir.
So I think we have questions of staff. Is that going to be Robert, Jared?
Jared for me.
Who's taking that one? So we're starting with Jared.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If we have more questions, we'll call you back up.
This is the first reading, right?
It is.
Yep.
Good evening. This topic has come up in our ad hoc committee, just so you know. We have extensively talked about this.
Okay.
So, but.
Can you pull that back toward you a little bit?
Yeah, so just so you know that. Jared, like Mr. Cronin said, the letters, there's two people complain, and I understand what you're saying. You get a couple of people in the neighborhood like to complain about everything. My question to you is this. None of them are complaining about the setback, but the construction of it. What is she referring to as far as the walls and whatnot? Can you explain that and what your plan is to work with him on that if this goes through?
So looking over this, I haven't looked at it thoroughly, but I brought it up when we started having this conversation. I see that we don't even have adequate information to be able to do a plan review on it because we don't know what the structure is that's being built. You know, it's a pre-engineered building. We should have some sort of manufacturer's installation instructions, some sort of detail. So that was the comment that was made to him, and why the permit was rejected from building is because we didn't have adequate information to even do a plan review.
But your point is after, this is one process, and there's no point in him wasting any effort on the building itself until this process is fulfilled. And so once it's fulfilled, you guys will get together and figure out what it is you need to do, correct? Sure. No, that's fine, sir.
They have a 9-page, they have 9 pages of blueprints that was sent by Allsteel Carport in their office.
Oh, no, I understand that, but my point is until this is resolved, he'd be wasting his time looking at it. That's what I wanted.
It's there.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, that's fine. That's all my question.
Okay, let's do Mr. Hollander and then come back to you.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir?
do you have 9 pages or not?
I have the email on my phone.
Hey, Robert, are you more familiar with this case? I would ask that we talk to Robert a little bit and find out what's going on, because the gentleman's mentioned you twice. Would you do me a favor and come up?
Yeah, but there's no reason Jared would have reviewed it yet if it haven't been approved through so it's almost a irrelevant point, because if he hadn't looked through it yet, because it hasn't been, this is the first issue that has to be cleared, right?
Yeah.
So, right, Dave? I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can't put him, he may not have looked, I'm just saying he might not have looked at it yet.
No, the building permit has not been approved.
Yeah, okay, no, that was my question, but
We're trying
that.
to get the zoning approval.
All right. Let's start with Mr. Hollander.
Yeah, my question is, how could this process get this far along? As an example, this man would have ended up having a 25-foot concrete pad, you know, and even if the carport manufacturer, installer would have come and got the permit, they would have found out that, hey, wait a minute, doesn't seem to make this would have been identified earlier than that? Because, I mean, you sunk a lot of money into this deal before you ever got to that point.
What we always tell property owners is when you're applying for a permit, don't do any work until you have a copy of that permit in hand. So if you hire a general contractor, you need to make sure that you have a copy of that permit issued from the county before you do any work or make any sort of payment whatsoever on a construction project.
Mr. Hanley.
Yeah, so the permit he's talking about was probably for the driveway, or the access for the driveway along the street. That's the first permit he got, was for the
concrete?
For the concrete, for the curb cut.
Okay.
Because the first process of what he did was lay the driveway extension and the carport, or the concrete, he laid down first.
Right.
But Jared, on a structure like this, on a portable prefab structure.
The curb cut.
There's no, it's attached to the flatwork. There's no footings. So the structure's exposed, so there's no hidden obstruction. So if he did put it up, and if he was under the belief that there was a permit, you would just do a final on it basically anyway, because it's a one-day deal. I mean, you just come out and do a final. So it's not like there's a structural permit, there's not intermediate inspections, correct, on a situation like this?
No, we should be able to do it at a final inspection.
Okay, that's why I could see there could be a little bit of confusion.
Mr. Cronin?
If I lived next to this structure, I'd be worried about the wind taking it. And I'll tell you a reason. I built a pole barn on my property out in the countries with county permits, okay? And county permit is a 6x6 post, 4 foot in the ground. You got to actually fill it with concrete so the wind can't take it. You got to use engineered truss. This thing is just screwed down that concrete pad, and you don't have the siding extended to the concrete. To me, I wouldn't want to be one of the houses next to this thing. I'd be worried about the damn thing every time the wind start blowing hard. So I mean, that being said, this isn't just a little short carport that you'd see in a residential driveway. This building's big. It's 10 foot tall. Okay.
But that's all part of his.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about.
I understand that. I have no problem with the variances, but I'm going to tell you, I don't see how this.
Hang on. Okay,
Yeah.
hang on.
I don't see the inherent safety of this structure compared to traditional pole barn that's built in this county for this type of purpose. Jared, maybe you can, are you familiar with like for instance, on a commercial steel building, which I have some of those too, they put that rebar, the threaded rods down that far into concrete. This thing's probably just got Tapcon anchors or something like that, a flat plate, right?
Well, the one comment that we made when we got the initial application is that we needed information related to snow loads and wind loads. And I do see that we received 9 pages of documentation. I haven't looked at it to see if it contains that information.
How is that building secured to that slab though? Just Tapcon anchors?
That's not to this board to
I don't
decide,
know.
Joe. That has nothing to do with what we're doing.
I think it does to me.
No, it
because-
doesn't. We
well,
do not do engineer calculations or wind uplift. That's
With
not
all
our
due
deal.
respect, let's stay in order.
I have the floor right now. My decision on this is going to be a lot to be what the neighbors have to say and the safety of the neighborhood. And for that reason, I want to know if this building's safe or not. Okay?
All right. Anyone else have questions? Yes, sir.
Jared, is the concrete allowed? I mean, was that a violation? Is that in the wrong place? I mean, you can have the concrete, you just can't build on it?
Typically, you can have flat work in those types of areas.
Okay,
but
so
you
when
can't
they
have a
went out and
structure.
inspected for that permit, that didn't send up any red flags that there
We
was a
never
problem
went
yet?
out to inspect for any of that flat work. If a curb cut was done, and I can't verify that because I don't have access to those records, but if that was done, that was inspected by highways, not anybody from building.
Okay, and they would just go out, well, they wouldn't be looking in terms of what structure you could put on it,
Correct.
just whether or not they put the cut at the right place?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on this bill? I'll give you final word.
Please. Mr. Cronin, I would very much like to.
Mr. Herbert, do you want to say something about this as well?
I was just ready to answer questions.
Okay.
Mr. Cronin, I'd very much like to answer your questions because I had exactly the same concerns. As we live in Tornado Alley and carports are like big sales. I work in engineering. So I worked with the structural engineers at All Steel Carport and had this one specially made. Normally they only come with 6 trusses. This one, which comes with a 90 mile an hour wind guarantee. I had them put 3 extra trusses in, and extra trusses in the ceiling to bring it up to a 140 mile wind gust guarantee. Okay, so I added extra trusses to it. So far, I've had over a 90 mile an hour wind gust on it during one of the storms, and it didn't budge. Okay, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and I did my due diligence whenever it came to designing it and working with the structural engineers. When you look at the 9-page document that is sent in, it will show that there are 9 trusses on there, and all the specs are on there.
Can I ask him a question?
You may.
How did you anchor the steel post to the concrete slab?
I would have to look, right now, I've been reading plans all day. I would
Okay.
have to read
Were
the
there
plans.
concrete studs poured into the like a traditional steel building with a concrete studs?
I would have to look at the plans. Like I say, I worked on 6 projects of my
Okay.
own today.
All right. Thank you.
And my head is spinning with blueprints. So, but everything is in the plans.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's move on to Bill number 4521.
Bill number 4521, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel, an ordinance amending the zoning district map of the County of St. Charles, Missouri by rezoning land from A, agricultural district, to R1D, single-family residential district, as per application RZ 17-10.
Any questions or comments on this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to Bill 4522.
Bill number 4522, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance accepting plans and specifications, ordering the improvements be made, setting forth a proposed assessment roll, and authorizing interim financing for the improvements for the Guttermouth Road, Wood Glen Estate Sanitary Sewer Neighborhood Improvement District, and the Guttermouth Road, Wood Glen Estate Sanitary Sewer Neighborhood Improvement District 2.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Appreciate you folks coming today. We'll move on to Bill 4524.
Bill number 4524, requested by Michelle McBride, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute a Fifth Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with the City of St. Charles for collection of taxes.
Any questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, we'll move on to Bill 4525.
Bill number 4525, requested by Steve Ellman, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance setting the 2018 rates for group medical insurance benefits with Aetna Life Insurance Company, Davis Vision, and dental insurance benefits with Lincoln Financial Group for county employees, elected officials, and retirees.
Any questions or comments on 4525? Seeing none, that will conclude bills for introduction. Is there any action to be taken on either of the tabled bills?
Bill, I'd like to have Bill 4507 removed from the table.
Motion made and second. All those in favor to remove Bill 4507 from the table, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Bill 4507 is on the floor.
I met with staff on this bill, and we were talking about, I was interested in doing some kind of a distance from wineries and everything, but quite frankly, it really complicates things, and there'll be unintended consequences and all kinds of stuff. So I guess what we're going to have to do is just deal with each one individually with the CUP and see how it goes from there.
Okay. So do you want to?
Yeah,
Do
we're
you
ready.
want to vote this one down? Do you want to have it removed?
No, it's ready to go. It's what, Mike, this is the one that we went over, right? This bill up here? Is this, Jennifer, this is the one that you rewrote, correct? 4507? And this has all the corrections in it. The first one had a lot of, wasn't written properly, but this has been cleaned up, and it also kind of helps the wineries out a little bit too. So,
So this is saying that you are in favor of Bill 4507?
yes.
Any other questions or comments about 4507?
I'm sorry, I didn't know we were going to pull this one off. So 4507 does not have the setback, the minimum distance from other
I did not
anymore?
change it because it just
Okay.
complicates it too much.
All right, I just didn't read this version recently.
We're just
so-
going to have to hear it limited wineries every time we have one in my district and,
Okay.
deal with
Mr.
it.
Cronin?
I wasn't prepared to vote on this tonight. I mean, I didn't
I don't
read on
care.
it.
We don't
Okay.
have to if you guys don't want to
Okay.
vote
I
on it.
mean, my questions as we talked about this would be limited to your district. Is this the current language limited to your district? Does it apply to my district as well?
There's nothing in here. We didn't change anything.
Well, we made changes, or strikeouts and.
No, we never made changes from when she introduced it to us several months
The
ago.
underlying bill is just cleaning up, separating this concept that a rural recreational activity is somehow tied with the idea of a wedding or an event. And so that we didn't have the possibility of somebody having a pumpkin patch one day and the next day having a large outdoor event facility and it still being legal without having to come in and ask for permission for that other conditional use, which you all saw as two separate things. So this did that kind of administrative application cleanup to achieve what you all had originally intended.
So to be clear, this bill does not have the minimum acreage or the setback that was originally part of it.
That's correct.
Yeah, I just reviewed Jennifer's memo, the summary on it, and it explains it pretty well, so I'm prepared to vote.
Mr. Cronin, do you have any other questions?
I'd like to see that summary, or maybe Jennifer, I guess,
should have
it's
it on
pretty
there.
much
It's on
exactly.
it's on the screen.
Yeah,
before it's on your computer, Joe.
It's not pulling up on mine. Maybe it'll pull down here. So Jennifer, to the bill that was passed in respect to Valley Farms, well, how does it change it specifically in that instance? Okay?
As it relates to Valley Farms, who was indeed doing both activities, correct? For a future applicant who comes in, they will seek conditional use permits for two separate things if that's what they really want. But they would not be coming in and seeking an application for a rural recreational activity that they had no intention of doing outdoor parties, but have a very broad category of a CUP awarded to them.
So basically, it just would define they would have to have multiple conditional use permits for multiple activities. Is that-
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Do you see that as being problematic for the staff? Because, for instance, in Valley Farms, you might have had to have 2 or 3 CUPs.
That would have been the preferred, as opposed to awarding CUPs to 2 other facilities that had nothing to do with rural recreational activities.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but, because you caught us all by surprise tonight, man. We didn't expect to do this.
You can retable it if you choose. I don't care.
Well, I'm remembering this bill, and my fogginess, if you will, comes from the fact of the changes that you were proposing. I was just making sure that those changes are not part of this, because when you originally put this in, it really cleared up the language for our rural recreational activities, and that was the purpose of this bill to begin with, because we had some language in there that was rather contradictory, if nothing else, and we wanted to make sure that we cleared that up. So I think that's part of Mr. Cronin's concerns in looking at that. Is I was in favor of this bill before, so I just wanted to make sure that I was remembering everything the way that it was.
I think that, the misunderstanding came because Joe had some other ideas that we discussed pretty in-depth.
Right.
But now, he's going to put those aside. So I think this is just cleaning up what planning and zoning and administration has asked us to do 6 weeks ago, I guess.
Mr. Cronin.
After reading this, I think we can try this, okay? And if there's a problem, we'll change it, okay? So I think I'm good with it, okay?
There you go. So would you call the roll, please, on Bill 4507?
Bill number 4507, an ordinance amending sections 405.060 and 405.080.c of the ordinances of St. Charles County, Missouri, OSCCMO, to remove weddings and wedding receptions from the definition of the rural recreational activities and authorize certain buildings and open spaces for wedding and wedding receptions as conditional uses in the A agricultural zoning district, subject to certain limitations. Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Councilmember Cronin?
Yes.
Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Councilmember Elam?
Yes. Bill number 4507 passes. That takes care of tabled bills for the evening. Move on to announcements and miscellaneous. Anything for the good of the cause? No parties going on in Defiance or out there that we...
It is the Fall Festival.
It is I knew there was something going on, so I wanted to give you that opportunity. I would entertain a motion to dismiss.
Motion.
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are dismissed.
Terry Hall.